Hmm. I thought if I maybe looked at the lyrics to Espresso, it'd be easier to parody them, but it's kind of nonsensical. So a
True.
little bit hard to change lyrics into more nonsense.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
This week we're discussing Chapter 5, Paragon and Piracy. And we're with Althea this chapter.
Yeah, I don't think maybe I'm wrong, but we have not heard from them this book yet, right?
I believe you are correct.
I was thinking about that right before I started this chapter. Like, I feel like I haven't heard from Althea in a while, but here we are, back with Althea.
And that's kind of evident in this chapter because there's a little bit of that catch up, that little bit recap going on in here. But again, this book is much better than the other ones with that recap, and it's kind of blended in beautifully throughout the text, introducing new information as well.
Right.
So we catch up with them after the events of the last book, where we saw them fight, them being Althea and Brashen, fight off the sea serpent that was attacking Paragon.
Right. And there was a whole meeting with Lavoy and Amber and Althea and Brashen on what to do next. And the consensus was that Lavoy would need to start training people to fight, but also intermingle the crew more so that they could work as a unit instead of separate.
Yep.
And that's also where Amber and Lavoy really butted heads.
Because he wanted to arm Paragon.
Yes. And Amber said no.
Yeah.
So exactly. A little bit of tension there.
So we're pulled into the story now with Althea talking to Clef, and we learned that Lavoy is also cracking down on discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And Clef got a little bit of a beating, and he is a little bit sullen about it because Lavoy's a big meanie, as we all know. And as Althea knows, but she can't really let on because she is a mate as well.
Yes.
And she can't undermine the first mate.
So we have Clef complaining about how he didn't do anything wrong and so doesn't deserve to be beat. And Althea replying kind of non-committally by saying, a lot of my beatings happened with when it wasn't that I did something wrong, but I didn't do something right either.
I think Lavoy's the mate, and you're the ship's boy, and I'm the second. Right and wrong don't come into it, Clef. Next time, be a bit livelier, and be smart enough to stay out of the mate's path if he's in a temper. He's allus in a temper, Clef observed sullenly. Althea let the remark pass. Every sailor had the right to moan about the mate, but she could not allow Clef to think that she would take sides on this. She hadn't witnessed the incident, but she had heard Amber's outraged account of it. Amber had been up in the rigging. By the time she had regained the deck, Lavoy had stalked away. Althea was glad there had not been an encounter between the first mate and the ship's carpenter. Nevertheless, it had intensified the enmity Amber and Lavoy felt for one another.
First, I wanted to say that I felt like there is a lot of growth in Althea that we see here. She is acknowledging that she doesn't personally agree with the decision of the first mate, but she can't verbally say that, which is a big change from the very first book where she just went under the captain's nose and did whatever she wanted because she felt that she could.
Right.
So I do feel like this is a really good show of growth. And I understand why she's trying to put that barrier there. But I also am frustrated because poor Clef. It's Lavoy, first of all. I hate him. Second of all, it's my boy Clef. And he does not deserve to be hit. He is a sweet little lamb. And I'll beat Lavoy up for him. So I'm Team Amber.
Watch out, Lavoy. Emma's coming.
So anyway, that said, I also find it really interesting that this is something that is making the relationship between Amber and Lavoy worse. I guess maybe not interesting because it's not surprising to me, but it is surprising to me how unsupportive, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word. Althea is towards Amber about being upset with this. She's kind of like, get over it. It's a ship. But also, it's nonsensical violence. So, of course, Amber's against it. I don't know. And Althea should be too, but.
Why? Why do you say that?
I feel, well, okay.
I think you want her to be because you're thinking about like it's 2024, you know?
Okay, touche.
Nonsensical violence, this brute Lavoy. But she grew up on ships.
But that's not how her father ran ships. And she was against it when they started. She was like, there's no need for violence.
That's not how her father ran ships, but Brashen had to once in a while.
Did he?
Yeah, he's mentioned that in his points of view. It didn't happen often because it's a live ship, right? But like, he even commented that Ephraim knew better than to ask the first mate what was going on with discipline. He just expected him to handle it.
Okay, but I thought whenever she got onto the ship, she had a whole problem about like violence and stuff because they shouldn't need to because her father never had to.
Well, she's also a sheltered,
right? So like she wasn't
daughter, you know.
Yeah, she wasn't aware of that being a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It just.
I think she's aware that it's a thing in the culture, though.
Right. I think something that really spoke out to me through this chapter that I don't love about Althea's character is her acceptance of the status quo when it doesn't necessarily directly impact her.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I don't like that because she is somebody who is trying to go against the status quo. And if you're trying to change things anyway, why don't you just fully change things for the better rather than be like, well, that's just how it is. And I don't want the aspect of me being a woman to affect anything. I want to change that, but everything else can stay the same. It just feels like a weird line to draw.
Because she's selfish.
That's true.
That's part of her character.
No, yeah, definitely.
She's very self-centered in all of her decisions, and even though she has matured, that we've pointed out already in this episode, she's still 20 years old,
right,
and not far removed from the spoiled girl she was before. And yeah, people take a liking to her the first time reading through because compared to Kyle, she's a saint, she's an angel. And yeah, Vivacia is a little baby to be coddled, and Althea should be on Vivacia right now and the captain of it, but Althea wasn't ready. Yeah. Althea wasn't going to be a good captain. She wasn't a great sailor at the beginning.
Right.
She was better than Kyle thought, obviously.
Right.
But she's grown in some of those aspects, in her leadership, in her sailing ability, in her, even in reflecting upon herself. But she still makes those decisions based on her own self-interest, and that's it. Yeah. She is struggling with herself, and we see this struggling with herself to cage the love she has for Brashen and not let that affect anything that's going on the ship. And Brashen is struggling too with that.
Yeah.
But in this chapter, there's a scene where they're sitting down next to each other and don't have that barrier up for 30 seconds. And she is thinking, oh my gosh, my heart's going to win out over my brain.
Yeah.
It's 30 seconds, Althea.
Yeah.
Keep it in your pants. It's more apparent in this reread that she is self-centered. And I'm glad you pointed that out. And it is a frustrating aspect of her character that she doesn't want more change. And I guess since we see Amber be kind of an advocate for all of those good changes and really a peak of the modern times into these books, because Amber and the Fool and Beloved kind of embodies a lot of those same ideals that a lot of people embody in the modern times now. As readers, we kind of want to put the other characters we like in that same level, but Fitz isn't like that. Althea isn't like that. Brashen isn't like that. Wintro isn't like that.
Yeah. No.
Wintrow's kind of close, I guess, but he's just too whiny.
He's 14, so.
So I don't know. I kind of agree with you there. It's hard to separate that out. And then you kind of just notice oh, Althea's, I guess, being her character, but she shouldn't be.
Yeah. I think that's something that really disappointed me this chapter, especially because it feels like we're getting to the end of her character arc, I guess. I know that we still have basically a whole book left, and she does I think, grow a little, but I really don't think that we see
It's
much more out of her.
I think you're right, and we'll talk about it near the end of the book as well.
Mhm.
But to me, it feels like this is kind of the extent, and then there's a huge traumatic event, and then it's kind of taken away, and she
Yeah.
just remains the same. But
Yeah.
like more stepping into a leadership position
Yeah.
and
And
comfortable with leading. I don't
right.
know.
I don't know. It's hard because obviously nobody's perfect, and
No,
you
and Robin
know,
Hobb doesn't write characters to be perfect
no.
either.
And that's fine, but obviously I like Althea. Althea is one of my favorites. She was my favorite originally,
Hmm.
and I still like her now even if I rag on her. But
We rag on her because we want her to be better.
yes. Yes, I rag because I care. But I don't know. I think I really have just come to the realization in this chapter of, okay, so this is just Althea, and I just kind of have to accept
Hmm.
on this deeper reread that that's where she's at.
It's not even that in your face about anything either, because
No.
it's not something you realize, at least I didn't the first couple times through,
Right.
but it's still there. She's just not annoying, or it doesn't feel like it's a horrible character trait. She just feels like young
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing. It isn't horrible. She's not a bad person
No,
necessarily. I don't think that makes her a bad person. I think it just
it's
is
a
something.
it's a very common thing for a lot of people. Like,
Yeah.
why would I think about the way things have always been done if it always works? I just want to be a part of that world. So let me,
Right.
as a woman, as a marginalized
Yeah.
group, like an individual, be a part of this. And I want to take part in the marginalization of everything else, of
Yeah. It's
everyone
like,
else.
and I do get it. I feel like there is that sense of not wanting to create too many waves. Like you're already creating a wave by
Yeah.
being in that world. So you don't want to create too many and be kicked out again. Like I definitely think there is some of that aspect going on. Probably.
And this is not the ship or the voyage to bring in those kind of
Right.
things. I mean, you're at a precarious crew on a very dangerous rescue mission.
Right. So I get it. I don't think it's out of character bad, a bad decision
Right.
necessarily. Like, but I also am kind of team beloved where if you believe in something, you should be standing by it at all
Mhm.
times, not just when it's easy. And I think whenever you really believe in something, when you're standing for it, even when it's hard, is better. I don't know. Like but I mean, obviously life doesn't work that way and it does become harder.
Yeah. It's just the
And
fact that, like, we started this because you wanted Althea to take Amber's side a little bit more against the disciplinarian that Lavoy is becoming. And
yes.
he's, foisting down on the crew. Althea grew up around that culture.
Right.
She grew up hearing about this. She's taken part on a slaughter ship that I'm sure had way worse beatings
Right.
and everything like that. She's just used to this culture now, and Beloved will never be used to that kind of thing.
That's fair.
And that's just the two people that they are, differing opinions and cultures where they were raised.
That's fair. I guess yeah. I think it's not fair to say that Beloved would never be used to it in a sense. Because to me, I guess what I'm hearing is like they couldn't fathom, which is not what you said. That's just what I'm taking from that. But I feel as though Beloved has encountered this throughout their life.
Yeah.
And that is what made them so adamant of like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Right.
Which I think is really brave of Beloved to come into a different culture and say, hey, that's wrong.
Right.
And you should really examine why you think it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'm pro Beloved. So anyway.
Anyway, Althea is thinking on the journey and everything that has happened. And here we get a little bit of that recap slightly. And it's kind of in an introspective look at what Paragon is going through and how he's acting. And she notes that everything's kind of been going all right, and Paragon seems to be making the most of the calm weather. Of late, the ship had seemed not only willing, but almost eager to speed them on their way to the pirate islands. He had dropped all his talk of serpents and even his metaphysical musings on whether a person was what other people thought of him or what he thought of himself. Althea shook her head to herself as she watched some gulls diving on the shallow school of fish. She was glad he had stopped waxing philosophical. Amber had seemed to enjoy those long conversations, but Althea was unsettled by them. Now Amber complained that Paragon seemed withdrawn and abrupt, but to Althea he seemed healthier and more focused on the task at hand. It could not be good for a man or a live ship to ponder endlessly on the nature of himself. She glanced back at Clef. The ship's boy was cautiously tonguing the split in his lip. His blue eyes were far away.
First of all, so funny for Althea to be like, I don't think anybody should be pondering the meaning of life after we just had 2 full books of Wintro doing just that with Vivacia.
Yeah.
So love that. I think that's so funny.
It shows an incredible lack of self-awareness on Althea's part, or curiosity in a greater world.
I think it also kind of speaks to why the boats prior to Vivacia and Wintro, the ships, sorry, there's a difference. But it speaks to why the live ships specifically probably haven't grappled with the fact that they're something else besides whatever family they're with.
Sailors are simple folk.
They're simple. They don't be pondering the meaning of life or nothing.
It's okay. It's an appropriation, guys. She's from the South.
It's fine. That's my roots. So I think that attitude is probably pretty common in the sailor community, if I were to, as an outsider, make a judgment.
Right.
And so I can see why, besides Paragon, who's been left to his own devices for decades, and Vivacia, who has had to pair with Wintro, why there hasn't been any other stories of live ships figuring out that they're part dragon.
You can see the differences between all the characters, right? We see Wintro and Amber are very similar in that they were raised on philosophical musings, on dreams, on portents, on, trying to critically think about the existence of things and the meaning of things. And they enjoy those questions and diving into that. Althea was raised in sailor culture and knows the meaning of a job incredibly well done, swiftly, keep your head down, focus on the task. Everyone works together in a team, gets the job done. The captain is the one who has to direct everybody. You're just doing your job.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't need to think about anything else.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. And to be fair, to me personally, philosophy, not always a very fun topic. I get it. But it is interesting to see how that affects the different people.
Why do you think that? I'm just kidding. But yeah, it is interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. But that's just something that I thought of. And it also, what a great pondering question. What makes a person a person? Is it who people think they are or who they think they are?
Mm-hmm.
I would love to spend some time. As much as I said I don't like philosophy, I'm over here like, I'm going to be thinking about that for the next 3 weeks.
I'm sure someone who has taken a few philosophy courses can write in and let us know which philosopher made that their life's work. All right, so she kind of turns back to Clef here and is like, well, better go on and get some sleep. You got a watch coming up shortly. He's like, yeah, I suppose.
Interestingly, he says, I know I gotta take it from him. I learned that when I was a slave. Sometimes you just gotta take it from someone and keep your head down. Althea smiled mirthlessly. Sometimes it seems to me there's not much difference between being a sailor and being a slave. Maybe, the boy agreed reluctantly. Night, ma'am, he added before he turned to make his way forward.
Yeah.
I don't feel like it's a great thing to talk to a slave that has had literal slave experience. Be like, yeah, we're basically the same as slaves on the ship. Like, well, he was a real slave, and I think it was probably 10 times worse.
Yeah. Great job, Althea.
Great. Love that. But also, maybe that's not a good thing. Maybe we should be thinking about how to change that culture, huh, Althea?
Well, now she's by herself and thinking about her mother and her sister snugged warm in their house and in their beds.
And they're fine.
And she's envying them, and they're just thinking about how to, bring Malta into society on such a limited budget. And that's all their worries. Of course, they probably worried about other things and probably worried about her, but, she did envy them sometimes.
And also, that's so boring. And she has to remind herself that she would be bored if that was her life. But
it's just a little funny juxtaposition here.
Knowing that there's actually a war going on.
I just see Robin Hobb sitting down, writing, Althea thinks this is happening, while the readers are like, no!
No, Althea!
For herself, she'd rather worry about the bigger problem. How was she to find her family live ship and return Vivacia safely to Bingtown? Althea's focused on the big issues here.
Right, the big picture.
So she thinks a little bit about how Vivacia was last seen in the Pirate Isles in Divvy Town, the pirate stronghold, and how are they going to accomplish that? So that's just kind of setting up and resetting the scene of where we're at. She doesn't really have any answers here.
Yeah, and that also transitioned into her thinking about her father, who has passed, and this is like another really good tactic of bringing up the past, but bringing new insights to it, because she does think about, like, what would my father say if he were here? What would he be proud of me
for going after the live ship, or upset for avoiding his advice to go around the Pirate Isles?
Yes, because he always avoided the Pirate Isles, she decides that he would be proud of her for going after the ship, but he probably wouldn't like her choice of ship.
Yeah, Paragon.
He had always said that the Paragon was not only mad, but also a bad luck ship. When she was a girl, he had forbidden her to have anything to do with him. Mm-hmm. I found that really interesting. I guess because we don't know much about her dad. So I don't know how, like, superstitious he was. But it is kind of, I mean, he's a sailor, so it's pretty...
Yeah. Sailors have a lot of superstitions. It's said in here. He didn't go trading up the Rainwild River, and that's partially not to have any ties up there, but maybe partially because of superstition.
Yeah.
And also, he was part of the generation that probably saw Paragon float in upside down.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's the third time he's come back with everybody dead, at least that they assume.
Right.
So, yeah, I found that to be something that interested me, because we get a little peek into who Ephron was, but also the fact that he didn't feel sympathy for Paragon is kind of surprising, because it feels like with how he treated Brashen, he was a sympathetic person, and he does feel like people who are down on their luck deserve second chances. So for him to not feel that way about a live ship, I don't know. I was like, ooh.
Did Paragon deserve his fourth chance?
Well,
he's probably thinking,
Touche.
And also, what can you do for him? He has his own live ship to look after, his own family to look after. Doesn't want his daughter playing around a mad, blind live ship that has killed everybody else before that have been on his decks.
Okay. I don't know. I just felt a little surprised when I read that about him. Yeah. Like, oh, that doesn't really fit in with the image I have of Ephron Vestrit.
Interesting. I thought you would have grabbed onto that. See, another reason why Ephron is
I think it points to me being correct, but I wasn't going to say that part.
Well, she turns aside from the railing there and aside from thinking about her father. She says, "It was a pleasant evening, and the ship had been unusually stable and sailing well for the past 2 days. Lavoy, the first mate, had recently embarked on a storm of discipline and cleanliness, but that was not unusual. Brashen, as captain, had told him to break down the restraint between the sailors they had hired and those who had been smuggled aboard to escape from slavery. Any mate knew that the way to unite a crew was to keep them all on the ragged edge for a few days." So she doesn't find anything unusual about, what Lavoy is doing, just how he's going about discipline.
Right.
And that's it, really. And honestly, it's only directed towards two of the sailors that we see in this chapter. One is Clef, who she knows works better with praise than discipline. And two is Lop, who is the half-wit.
Yes, that's what she has called him.
Yes. So honestly, she doesn't have too much of a problem with the way that Lavoy is running his shifts at this point.
Yeah, she kind of seems to understand what he's doing, even if
Still
she
doesn't like him.
yeah, doesn't like him, doesn't fully agree. But she does make mention a couple times that there's nothing that she could really fault him with
Right.
without looking like she's just complaining about the first mate. And she, as second mate, feels that she can't put her feelings into her account. Like it needs to be more methodical.
Evidence driven or something.
Yeah. And I wonder too, obviously, maybe this is because I'm a woman reading this, but it does feel a little bit like she doesn't want to be the emotional woman who she just feels like that's a bad thing to do. And a man wouldn't put his feelings into whatever he was doing, which is not true. But
Not true. And also, I mean, she's very concerned with how she's viewed because this is the first time she's sailing since Vivacia as
Right.
a woman. Well,
Yes.
she sailed on Ophelia a bit,
True.
right? But this is the first time with a foreign, unknown crew who is going to maybe look at her differently if
Right.
she is seen as just the woman again, because she's
Right.
gained respect since the serpent attack.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to think about too when we see her not pushing for bigger changes, making waves,
Yeah.
because there is that fear of being just a emotional woman. I think that's driving underneath everything,
Yeah.
even if she doesn't say that. And again, maybe I'm just getting that read because I'm a girl and I've been there, but like I don't know, that's just something that I felt when I was reading this of like, oh, I wish you would do more, but then also like I get it because I don't know.
Yeah. Althea's kind of overwhelmed by thinking about everything that has to come after. They're learning to become a sailing crew. They're learning to work together, but they also have to learn to fight and not just repel attacks, but go to another ship and attack and kill, probably. Suddenly, it all seemed too much. How could they hope to locate the Vivacia, let alone win her back, with such a patchwork crew and an unpredictable vessel? Good evening, Althea, Paragon greeted her. Without even thinking about it, she had come to the foredeck near the figurehead. Good evening to you, Paragon. So, which of our troubles torments you most this evening? They all nip at my heels like a pack of yapping feists, ship. In truth, I don't know which to worry about first. Then kick them away as if they were truly a pack of curs and fix your gaze instead on our destiny. He swiveled his bearded face away from her to stare sightlessly toward the horizon. Kennit, he said in a low and fateful voice, we go to face down the pirate and take back from him all that is rightfully ours. Let nothing stand between us and that end. Althea was stunned into silence. She had never heard the ship speak so. Initially, he had been reluctant even to venture out on the water again. He had spent so many years as a beached and blinded derelict that he had balked at the idea of sailing, let alone setting out on a rescue mission. Now he spoke as if not only accepted the idea, but relished the chance for vengeance against the man who had seized Vivacia. He crossed his muscular arms on his broad chest. His hands were knotted into fists. Had he truly made her cause his own? Oh, the ignorance of Althea.
Yeah. I mean, to be
It's
fair,
fun.
how would she possibly know?
Readers don't really know at this
Yeah.
point. They could have guessed, but they don't really know. Interesting. Yeah. Paragon is now fully focused on getting back to Kennit,
To take
Which-
what's rightfully his.
which is interesting because he must feel very conflicted about it.
Right.
Because Kennet's last direction towards him was, lose yourself and lose these memories of me. And that was kind of Paragon's whole thing. And
Yeah.
now he's like, okay, going to Kennit.
I'm wondering,
He's probably feeling a little bit jealous.
right? Definitely jealous. I was wondering if maybe that too is part of it. Like he's picked a new live ship.
Mhm.
He is living his best life, and Paragon has had to sit on a beach for the last however many years and rot.
Right.
Well, as much as a live ship can rot. And now he's going towards claiming what is his or what is theirs, I guess. And I'm wondering if that means more taking back Kennit as his captain.
I think so. I think he's just like, I'm going to be rejoined with the person I'm bonded with, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Which makes sense.
my
And
family,
yeah. Yeah. I
the
think,
one who actually loved me, you
yeah.
know?
Oh, I hate that so much. Well, I don't know. I find it really interesting that he's turned this page. And obviously, Althea is skeptical of like, did he really join our cause? Which he hasn't.
No.
That's not what this is about. But she doesn't know that. And yeah, like you said, only a rereader would fully understand the gravity of why he is going forward willingly, I guess.
Right.
But it is interesting that it took him out on sea for a couple weeks to really get
Settle
into
in.
this frame of mind, I guess, instead of
Yeah.
being afraid and scared to be out on sea, to decide, no, I am going to get revenge, or maybe not even revenge, just meet back up with Kennit.
Right. And Paragon advises Althea not to worry about the little things in between, just focus on the end. Long or short, if you worry about every step of a journey, you will divide it endlessly into pieces, any one of which may defeat you. Look only to the end. I think that we will succeed only if we prepare ourselves, Althea objected. No, teach yourself to believe you will succeed. If you say, when we find Kennit, we must be good fighters, then you have put it off until then. Be good fighters now. Be now what you must be to succeed at the end of your journey, and when the end comes, you will find it is just another beginning. Now you sound like Amber, she complained. No, he contradicted her flatly. Now I sound like myself. The self I put aside and hid. The self I intended to be again someday when I was ready. I have stopped intending. I am now.
Okay, so quick interjection. Is that self Kennit slash a Ludluck?
No, it's Paragon, I think. I don't
Okay.
think. Because Paragon has spent so many years by himself and he wasn't quickened, properly
Mm-hmm.
in a good way. He has these different voices that come out, but I don't think they're actually separate entities that seize control.
Okay.
I think that it all is him. It's just Paragon expressing himself in different ways.
Okay.
So I think this is just still Paragon, but I think it's a more secure version of himself with some of the dragon thoughts in there.
Okay.
I think that's kind of like the philosophical musing and like the I am set on this destiny. We have to be, one being together kind of thing.
Okay, sure. Interesting. I was feeling like maybe he was ready to embrace the part of him that's a Ludluck, because this whole situation or advice session that he's giving Althea felt very much of an explanation of how Kennit operates, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, maybe.
I was thinking about it in terms of Kennit's luck and how Kennit is really good at the grandeur and thinking of the end goal, right? He's going to be king of the Pirate Isles,
Mm-hmm.
and he already does act like a king. And his luck will get him there. You just have to believe that if you've said something will happen, it will, and you just
Trust
get
in
good
it.
now. Yeah, you have to have trust. That feels very much like Kennit when he's trusting his luck and
True.
making any plan that, like, you just have to go forward and take the steps and not worry about the little details.
Mm-hmm.
And it does work out for him that way. So I don't know. I just thought maybe that's like a Ludluck trait
And
of,
it could be the part of him that he hid away and is now bringing forward because now he's
Mhm.
focused on Kennit. Could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he has taken so much of Kennit that if
It was when he was a kid,
true,
but yeah, he has.
so that's why I was like, oh, maybe this is Kennit or just his Ludluck side really
Mhm.
coming through. Because I think it would have to be this book. We get an explanation of some of the stuff that's happened to him, right?
Yeah.
So I think with that, it's good to think about how maybe he would shy away from wanting to be a Ludluck. And now he's like, well, I am a Ludluck, but I'm Paragon too. So maybe it's a mixture of both. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
Althea is kind of shaking her head to herself because she thinks it was easier to deal with him when he was sulky. She loved him, but it was not like her bond with Vivacia. Being with Paragon was often like caring for a beloved but ill-mannered and difficult child. Sometimes it was simply too much trouble to deal with him. Even now, when he seemed to have allied himself with her, his intensity could be frightening. An uncomfortable silence fell. She just kind of like infantilizes him and thinks that none of his advice is good because he's unstable.
Yeah, also annoying that's like, oh, he's like an ill-mannered child. It's just too much to deal with. Like, maybe I see now why Malta became the way she is, if that's how the Vestrits view things that are uncomfortable.
Right.
Just too much to deal with. Better let it go. And again, it makes me think about, so I feel bad for Paragon always, obviously, but it also kind of makes me think about Vivacia and how nobody listens to her either. And I mean, to some extent they do, but mostly it's kind of like, yeah, okay, you're a ship. I'm a human. I know more.
Yeah.
And if I don't understand what you're saying, you're just a little crazy and it's fine. And it just makes me feel really bad for these live ships because we're seeing this with two different live ships that are completely different manners and attitudes. And I guess we're seeing
neither in the best situation,
no,
to be fair.
But it just makes me wonder how often when live ships are born, if they're shut down like that until they're just like, yeah, I'm only part of the family. And I don't know, it's just a sad thought to have.
Yeah. You're going to be sad about live ships no matter what.
Yeah.
You were sad about when they turn into dragons and then live ships are just memories.
Yeah.
You're sad about, them being live ships and then the dragon parts are just memories.
Yeah. It's all sad. I don't know.
Well, Amber joins Althea and Paragon and says, you told me so if you want. Althea guesses that she spoke to Brashen, and Amber confirms, like, yeah, Brashen's like, Lavoy can do what he wants. He's the disciplinary guy, so he's first mate. It's his deal.
Yeah, Brashen.
And Althea's like, yep, I told you so.
It's not necessarily that Brashen didn't care, but he doesn't care because it is first mate doing what first mates do, so.
Althea says, stop thinking of him as Brashen. If Brashen were on the street and saw Lavoy knock a young boy down, he'd jump right in. But we're not on the street. We're on a ship, and he's the captain. If he can't stand between the first mate and the crew. If he did it even once, the whole crew would lose respect for Lavoy. They'd have an endless string of complaints about him, and every one of them would wind up at the captain's feet. He'd be so busy nursemaiding, he'd have no time to be captain. I'll wager that Brashen does not admire Lavoy's action any more than you do, but the captain knows that the ship's discipline must come before a few bruises to a boy's pride. How far will he let Lavoy go? Amber growled. That's the captain's concern, not mine. I'm just the second mate, And then notices that Amber isn't looking super well, is kind of sweating a little bit, and asks, are you well? And Amber explains it's just, a fever that happens once in a while. And we know it's the changing illness that whites get. And Amber assures her, oh, it's not catching. It's fine.
It's not a like catchable virus. This is just a thing that happens to me. Quick question for you. Why is Amber having the changes? Because we know that these changes happen when the path is fulfilled or what the path.
Yes.
In some way, it seems as though whenever
a big change has been made or something.
Yes. But before now and after this, I think, it feels as though those changes only happen when Beloved has been directly involved and had a hand in making the change. Did
Wintrow's alive?
Sure.
That's the change. She meant to follow the nine-fingered slave boy. That's the catalyst she was supposed to follow for this path to happen.
Right.
To keep him alive in the future. and he chose to live, but it was without her help. But either way, that path survived.
Okay, so you think it's fully contingent on the path, even if the prophet doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yes. The prophets, as the Fool explains to Fitz, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, if I'm misremembering, but they explain to it as they just see it. They are not the ones who have to guide everything. They're there to try to make the catalyst make the right decisions. That can still happen on its own, because the Fool explains that every farmer or peasant can, do one little action. It can change stuff. People can still make choices, and the catalyst can still make those correct, quote unquote, choices to guide it into a better path. But the prophet is there to try and help guide it to that better path.
Right.
They're not necessary.
But then, so this is where I get a little bit confused, because we know that the whites in the tower and everybody that is part of the tower, the whites tower, they all are super pale because they're avoiding the correct path, right?
We don't know.
Okay.
It could be because of their breeding program too, that
Also
they're not
that,
true whites.
Yeah. So either way, none of them have really changed. They're all the same. But Prilkrop has changed, meaning that whenever it was his turn, he led the
because he was
catalyst.
before the other ones.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, is Prilkrop also going through this change right now? Or like,
I don't know.
Because he isn't directly affected, but he is a white.
Yeah.
And then if that were the case, why wouldn't all the other whites in the tower be affected? So that's where I'm like, okay, so why is it that is it because this is Beloved's task that they have been set upon?
Yeah, it seems like this is these specific prophets that are once in a generation or a couple generations have one specific prophecy that they dream of that they can accomplish in their time, and that seems to be their task. And they understand that. And I mean, Beloved studied it, right? He wrote down his own dreams and was kind of, oh yeah, you're so good at this, even though you're not a real prophet in Claris, but was allowed to study and read things before he escaped. So it seems like they have their own tasks set upon, and I think Prilkrop is just, he did his, and he's been sitting on the island forever.
Obviously did it successfully. Yeah. I wonder what his task was. And are they all related to dragons, or?
Probably not.
I don't know. Because I guess
some of the tasks I can imagine back when whites were alive, some of them were probably to curb some of the dragon's influence.
Fair.
It's trying to bring the world into a better place, right? They don't want, they want a harmony. They don't want anything.
That's fair. And I guess
overshadowing the other.
If we think about the tales from the Mountain Kingdom of the white that helped create the Mountain Kingdom's rule, that doesn't seem to have anything to do with dragons one way or the other. So,
and there's we get epigraphs of a white prophet with a little girl as a catalyst, and the white prophet is trying to teach her things and try to make her find water for this land, I think. And she's obsessed with the local wildlife and finds, the plants hold water, and that's how she changes things.
Right.
It's not what the white prophet necessarily wanted. She just knew that was the outcome eventually that they wanted. And I don't know, not everything to do with dragons necessarily.
That's interesting. Okay, then yeah. But that's something that I thought of because, I mean, I guess you could argue that it's not about Wintro. It's about Malta, and it could be the direct influence of talking with Malta that one time and opening her up to the skill by touching her with the fingertip.
Tintaglia being released. Yeah.
That's directly influenced from...
That could be definitely the change for Amber as well, because part of the task is to bring dragons back, and one of them just got released into the world. So that could definitely be.
And I guess, I mean, obviously, Wintro did his part by releasing She Who Remembered, which I assume is part of why he needed to be alive.
Yeah.
but I don't know. So it could be both. It could be both things.
Everything happening in the
Yeah.
right way.
Just, I don't know. Just something to think on. And also, I wanted to say, I think this is when I officially knew this was 100% without a doubt beloved.
Yeah, the
The
sickness. Yeah.
sickness. Prior to that, I think I had an inkling and was like,
You always thought it was some sort of white.
yeah, I was never fully fooled. But yeah, I think this is where I'm like, this has to be
100%.
beloved. This is, or at least definitely white, but it's beloved. It's beloved. You can't convince me otherwise.
So Amber convinces them like it's not, catching at all. Paragon adds, quietly like, well, even rumor of a plague or fever can cause the crew to be jittery. So Althea's right. You got to keep it to yourself. Brashen will probably find you some quiet things. If you want a cabin to yourself, we could probably arrange that, Stay out of everyone's knowledge that you're kind of feeling sickly.
Yeah. And Amber does say, I don't think anybody but you and Jack will even notice.
Right.
So,
and Jack's been around me before and knows this, so it's fine.
And then asks, will you have a problem sharing a bunk with me?
I think I will take your word that there is nothing to fear. But you should still tell the captain. He may be able to arrange your duties so that you have more time to rest. She did not add that he probably would find ways to isolate Amber to keep her illness secret. The captain, a small smile bent Amber's lips. You truly think of him that way all the time? It is who he is, Althea replied stiffly. At night in her narrow bunk, she certainly didn't think of Brashen as the captain. By day, she had to. She wouldn't tell Amber just how hard it was for her to keep that distinction clear. Talking about it wouldn't make it any easier. It was better kept to herself. She suspected uncomfortably that Paragon knew her true feelings for Brashen. She waited for him to say something horrible and revealing, but the figurehead kept silent. Paragon can have some tact. Come on.
Yeah, he knows. He knows.
Give him the benefit of the doubt, a little bit. Not all the time, but a little bit.
True. I want to say, just like we pointed out with book-to-book differences with Selden, I want to point out a little bit of a difference with Althea. And maybe I'm imagining this, so feel free to correct me. But it feels like Althea's more girly this book than she was last book. And I don't mean that in a negative way necessarily. It just feels more like last book, Althea was, I don't know, like, yeah, she had feelings for Brashen, but that wasn't like the end all be all sort of like feeling towards her. She still was worried about her ship.
Right.
And then now this chapter was the first time we've seen her since last book. She's very prim and proper and like, oh, but that's how things always are. And oh, I love Brashen. He's so cute and handsome, but I can't. And it just feels very like damsel in distress-esque.
It's definitely cranked up this book, but I think there was some of this sentiment at the end of last book. So it doesn't surprise me, but I agree with you that it has been cranked up to like a 10.
Yeah, so I think that's important. I do think that it makes sense and is within character. It's just amped up.
It makes sense for her as well because they were not even on the journey yet.
Right.
And then now they've been on the ship for weeks. They went through a traumatic event together.
Mm-hmm.
He's been tender towards her. Yeah, they shared a kiss. Like, okay, it's had time to linger on things. But she definitely lingers on it more in her mind.
Yeah. And so I thought I would just point that out, that since we were harsh on Selden,
yeah,
I feel really bad about that.
Why?
I don't know, because I like Selden.
It's not an actual 10-year-old boy.
No, but also, I don't know. To be fair, I noticed it with Althea as well, where from book to book, it feels not quite as big of a difference as it felt with Selden, but I feel there is a difference between who Althea is in this chapter and who she was the last chapter we saw her.
Amber agrees with Althea, saying, in some ways it is his best part. I think he has lived many years planning and dreaming about how he would be if he were captain. I think he has suffered under poor captains and learned well under good ones, and he brings all that to what he does now. He is more fortunate than he knows to be able to live his dreams. So few men do. So few men do what? Jack demanded as she strolled up and joined them. She grinned at Althea and gave Amber an affectionate nudge. She leaned on the railing, picking her teeth. Althea stared up at her enviously. Jack radiated vitality and health. The deckhand was long-boned, well-muscled, and completely unself-conscious about her body. She did not bind her breasts at all, nor worry that her sailor's trousers reached no farther than her knee. Her long blonde braid was tattered to straw from the wind and salt water, but she cared not at all. She is, Althea thought uneasily, what I pretend to be, a woman who does not let her sex deter her from living as she pleases. It wasn't fair. Jack had grown up in the Six Duchies and claimed this equality as her birthright. Consequently, men usually ceded it to her. Althea still sometimes felt she needed someone's permission simply to be herself. Men seemed to sense that in her. Nothing came easily. She felt the struggle was as constant as her breathing. So, a little bit of jealousy and envy from Althea here at Jack's apparent ease in her life.
How do we know how old Jack is? Like, do we think she's mid to late 20s?
I don't know.
Mid to late 30s?
I would say probably mid 20s to early 30s.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, there's no way to tell.
Yeah.
I just wonder if this is something that happens with age. And
a little more self-assured. I mean, she did grow up in the Six Duchies, which, Althea makes a good point.
True.
Much more welcoming there of people because they need people to survive.
True. The barbarians up there.
Yes.
But also, I think maybe more importantly, Jack doesn't let other people tell her who she is.
Right.
And Althea kind of does. And that's...
Again, age.
Yeah, age for sure. But also probably culture, because there are so many rules on what a woman is. But it's a little bit... I want to say silly, but it's not. But it's a little silly to me because she spent her whole life being like...
I'm not who people say I am.
Yeah, I'm not who people say I am. That's not all a woman can be. I'm so much more than that. And yet... then also here, and I think this again is she just feels so girly here and like, oh, I wish I didn't care about how I looked. Okay, girl, like then don't. I don't know, like but I get it because I think I've been there too, where it's like, oh, I wish I was like that woman over there. She seems so cool and self-assured, and then it's like, okay, so do that, like. Whom amongst us hasn't?
Now, I know this is not the intended purpose of the following couple paragraphs, but oddly to me, it just popped in my head that the following couple paragraphs feel like Robin Hobb had to pass the Bechdel test in this chapter. Because Jack just like, oh, I need a needle for like to sew some things. Do you have one, Amber? And Amber's like, yeah, it's somewhere. And then Althea chimes in, oh, you can have mine, because Althea knows Amber's need for personal space. And then Jack turns to, oh, thanks. Now what do men do?
Yeah.
It's just funny.
Hobb was like, oh, we can't just have three women talking about men. We gotta.
Yeah. I know that's not like probably the purpose. It's just, conversation. But it just felt funny.
And also cute that,
Althea's conscientious of Amber's needs too.
And knows that Amber needs to have her own things.
Probably that also kind of pointed you out to the fool as well. It's just like, oh, that's beloved again.
Right.
The changing fever plus this, that's definitely.
Beloved's things are beloved's things.
So Amber replies to Jack, not what you're thinking. We were speaking of people living their dreams, and I said that few do, and even fewer enjoy the experience. For too many, when they get their dream, they discover it is not what they wanted, or the dream is bigger than their abilities and all ends in bitterness. But for Brashen, it seems to be turning out well. He is doing what he always wished to do and doing it well. He is a fine captain. He is that, Jack observed speculatively. And I'll bet he does a fine job elsewhere, too.
Love it. I love it. I do want to ask, do you think Amber is talking about anybody specific from the series on when they finally do live their dreams, it's not what they expected?
I don't think so, because she hasn't revisited Fitz and doesn't know like how miserable he kind of is. And
You don't think she would know through the connection they have with the fingerprint?
maybe, but I think they view it as very, very dull at this point, and
Sure.
it's not super strengthened, and it fades over years until he heals
Right.
the Fool again, Lord Golden, at the end of next trilogy. So I don't think it's anybody specific, but I think, Amber's been around for over 50 years, running around and talking to people and being in people's lives,
That's fair.
I think I did that math right. About 50 years now.
Since the
No, in total.
Oh,
I think
okay.
Amber is, probably 50 years old or so,
That's crazy.
at least. Because we know that in the next trilogy, when he visits Fitz, because at that point he's the Fool, he says, I am older than you and Night Eyes combined. And Night Eyes at that point is like 17, and Fitz is 34 or something like that. So.
Okay, yeah.
We know that the Fool's probably 50 or so.
Right. And we know that White's, or at least the Fool beloved, ages a lot slower.
Yes. Fitz and the Fool came into maturity about the same time.
Yes.
But the Fool just happened to be like
30.
20 something or 30 something years old. Yeah.
So anyway, I was wondering if this was a little bit of a dig at Regal.
Oh, interesting.
Because he always dreamed of being king and then wasn't really good at it. And like really just endangered most of his nation.
I don't think he thought that, though. I think he thought he was the best.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like I feel like maybe a part of Regal was always like, maybe I'm not doing well because like, I don't know. But he probably blamed it on other people. I don't think he thought it was his fault.
No.
But I think he knew that like there were aspects of what was happening that weren't
That could have gone better,
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just looking into that because I would take anything as a dig at Regal at this point. But yes, Jack is real interested in Brashen and his clean hands.
According to Althea, Jack was a woman of appetites. It was not the first time Althea had heard her express interest in a man. Shipboard life and rules had pushed her into a period of abstinence that was at odds with her nature. Although she could not indulge her body, she let her mind run wild and often insisted on sharing her ruminations with Althea and Amber. It was her most common topic of conversation on the rare nights when they were all in their bunks. Jack had a wry humor about her observations, and her tales of past liaisons gone awry often left the other two women helpless with laughter. Usually, Althea found her ribald speculations about the male sailors amusing, but not, she discovered, when the man in question was Brashen. She felt as if she couldn't take a full breath. Jack didn't appear to notice her stiff silence. Ever notice the captain's hands? Jack asked them rhetorically. He's got the hands of a man that can work. And we've all seen him work back there on the beach. But now that he's captain and not in the tar and slush, he keeps his hands as clean as a gentleman's. When a man touches me, I hate to have to wonder where his hands last were, and if he's washed them since. I like a man with clean hands.
He's a captain.
We shouldn't talk like that about him.
She saw Amber wince at her prim little words. It's so funny because she like goes into the gasping and clutching her pearls when it's about Brashen because she has feelings for Brashen and doesn't want.
Wait, really?
Wait, how did you figure that one out? No, she just doesn't want Jack to talk about it or think about the possibility of them being together more like, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. And again, she's worried that Paragon might say something.
Right.
Or, Jack will question her because of those words.
Right. And so she's playing this really fine line of trying to get her to stop talking, but not revealing that it's because she has feelings for Brashen. And obviously Amber also knows the secret, so she's just waiting for this to blow up in her face.
Either way, Jack replies, He won't always be the captain, or maybe I won't always be a deckhand on his ship. Either way, I expect a time will come when I won't have to call him sir. And when it does... She sat up abruptly, grimming with a flash of white teeth. Well, she lifted an eyebrow. I think it would go well between us.
Her reasoning is because she feels that he watches her more than the others. And he once told her that she did smartly on a job.
Mm-hmm.
And Althea says, he watches everybody because he's a good captain, actually. And of course, he's going to tell you did good if you did good, just like he'd tell you if you're doing bad.
And Jack's like, yeah, of course. But he had to be watching me to know that I was doing my work smartly.
Yeah, which is so fun. It's just such a good conversation. I love it. It made me giggle the whole time because I kind of think Jack knows and is ribbing Althea. Like, I think she's just trying to mess with Althea. I don't think... I mean, maybe she does think Brashen's cute and would, but like, I think it's more about getting a rise out of Althea at this point.
Leans over to Paragon and says, what do you think, Ship? You know Brashen. What is his type?
And then Althea's like, oh my God, please. Oh, Saw, please do not tell him anything. But surprisingly, Paragon kind of plays along.
He spoke out in a boyish voice, obviously flattered by the woman's attention. He sounded almost flirtatious as he replied, Brashen? Do you truly think he would speak freely of such things to me? Jack rolled her eyes. Is there any man who does not speak far too freely when he is around other men? Perhaps he has dropped a story or two with me. From time to time, the ship's voice took on a salacious tone. Ah, I thought perhaps he had. So, what does our captain prefer, Ship? No, let me speculate. Perhaps, as he always praises his crew for working smart and lively, that is what he prefers in a woman, one who is quick to run up his rigging and lower his canvas. Jack! Althea could not keep her offense from her tone, but Paragon broke in. In truth, Jack, what he has told me he prefers is a woman who is quiet more often than she speaks. Jack laughed easily at his remark. But while these women are being so quiet, what does he hope they'll be doing? Jack, all Amber's rebuke was in a single, quietly spoken word. Jack turns back to them with a laugh, while Paragon demands, what? And Lavoy is there.
Yeah. So the
funny conversation.
Over. It is really
broken up by Lavoy saying, sorry to interrupt the hen party, but the captain wishes to see the second mate.
So annoying. And of course, he's got to make it a little dig about the girls talking, as though, would he say that if it was three men talking about a woman's preference? Probably not. He'd go, all right, boys. Like, the word. But it's a hen party because it's three women. Sure. Okay, Jan.
Althea wondered how much he had heard and chided herself. She should not be loitering on the foredeck, talking so casually with crew members, especially on such topics. She resolved to imitate Brashen more in how he separated himself from the general crew. A little distance helped maintain respect. Yet the prospect of severing her friendship with Amber daunted her. Then she would truly be alone, just as Brashen was alone.
I find it really interesting that, first of all, she doesn't mention her friendship with Jack. And secondly, that the response to this is not, oh, Lavoy's a jerk and he shouldn't have done that, or whatever, it's dumb. It's, oh, I shouldn't be having leisure time with my friends. Because is that how a ship is run? That if you're first or second mate, you're not allowed to talk with people? Like, as long as it's not affecting your duty, why does it matter? And instead, Althea has this weird idea, and kind of so does Brashen, that you need to separate yourself and that you have to be a leader, you need to be separate. And maybe
Kennit has the same ideas too.
Yeah. And maybe in some capacity there needs to be a line, but I feel as though taking away the fun, like, I don't know, just bad.
She does notice that it's belittlement. She ignores the belittlement of the hen party remark. He was first mate. He could rebuke, chide, and mock her, and part of her duty was to take it. That he had done so in front of crew members rankled, but to reply to it would only make it worse.
Right.
But he also says, she also says, I'll go report to Brashen, and he says, when you're done, go see to Lop. He needs some sewing as well.
And then cracks his knuckles to let her know why, because he's beat up Lop again.
That remark was intended to bait Amber, Althea knew. The doctoring that Lop required was a direct result of Lavoy's fists. Lavoy had discovered Amber's distaste for violence. He had not yet found any excuse to direct his temper at Jack or the ship's carpenter, but he seemed to relish her reactions to the beatings he meted out to the other crew members. With a sinking heart, Althea wished that Amber were not so proud. If she would just lower her head a bit to the first mate, Lavoy would be content. Althea feared what might come of the simmering situation.
This, I don't know. I hate this take. The lower your head and just take it because that's what's done. And I specifically wrote, but why should you keep status quo when it's wrong? And which is how Amber feels, like if something's wrong, you should call it out. And the only way to change things is by calling things out and standing for what's right. And again, we have Althea like, well, that's just how things are. And if she could just learn to do it, it'd be fine. Nobody likes it, but that's just how it is.
Right.
But why? Why is it that way? And why are you going with it if everybody disagrees with it? But now Althea's kind of worried for Amber because Lavoy is staying. Seems like he's going to stay on deck near Amber.
And Jack is withdrawing.
So it's just going to be the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't really want to leave Amber there alone because if something happened, it would be Amber's word against his. And when a mate declared something was so, the word of a common sailor meant nothing at all. So Althea then makes up an excuse to try to help Amber get out of the situation and says, Carpenter, I want the latch on my cabin door repaired tonight. Little jobs should be seen to in calm weather and quiet times, lest they become big jobs during a storm. Amber shot her a look. In reality, Amber had been the one to point out that the door rattled against the catch instead of shutting tightly. Althea had greeted the news with a shrug. I'll see to it then, Amber promised her gravely. Althea lingered a second longer, wishing the carpenter would take her excuse to get away from Lavoy. But she didn't, and there was no way Althea could force her without igniting the smoldering tension. She reluctantly left them together.
So she has to leave Lavoy and Amber together and walks down to Brashen's captain's quarters.
Then she talks about how the Paragon had been built with the assumption that the captain would also be the owner, or at least a family member. Most of the common sailors made do with hammocks strung below decks wherever they could find room. Brashen, however, had a chamber with a door, a fixed bed, a table, and a chart table, and windows that looked out over the ship's wake. Isn't that just every captain's quarters?
Yeah, just another description of how live ships are.
I guess. It just felt really weird to be like, man, they just thought the captain would be a family member or the owner because it's so nice, and then just describes every captain's quarter ever.
There is a lot of talk about how the Paragon's rooms are more cramped than other live ships, it seems, because there's like a lot of room for cargo. And I think the captain's quarters are just a lot bigger in comparison.
Okay.
It feels like that to me because they've harped on it a couple times and only mentioned it maybe like once on Vivacia.
Yeah, I guess on Vivacia they talk about how nice all the fittings are, how it's like really thoughtfully picked out or something.
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Well, she knocks. She comes in, and Brashen looked up from her from the chart table. He looked tired and much older than his years. His scalded face had peeled after he was burnt by the serpent venom. Now the lines on his forehead and cheeks and beside his nose showed even more clearly. The venom burns had taken some of his eyebrows as well. The gaps in his heavy brows made him look somewhat surprised. She was grateful that the spray of scalding poison had not harmed his dark eyes.
How old did we think Brashen was?
He's like upper 20s, I think.
Okay.
27, 28.
I love the description that he has all these wrinkles.
I mean, he's been in the sun for 15 years.
The importance of sunscreen, kids.
Yeah.
Everybody put on your sunscreen.
Yeah, ages you. Well, Brashen suddenly demanded, and she realized she had been staring at him. You summoned me, she pointed out. He touched his hair as if he suspected something amiss there. He seemed rattled by her directness. Summoned you? Yes, I did. I had a bit of a talk with Lavoy. He shared some ideas with me. Some of them seem valuable, yet I fear he may be luring me to a course of action I may regret later. I ask myself, how well do I know the man? Is he capable of deception, even? I'd like your opinion on how the ship is being run of late. Since the serpent attack, she asked needlessly, there had been a subtle shift in power since she and Brashen had stood together to drive the serpent away. The men had more respect for her abilities now, and it seemed to her that Lavoy did not approve of that. She tried to find a way to phrase it without sounding as if she criticized the mate. She took a breath.
I feel like that's a little bit annoying that she's like, oh, I can't just speak freely to Brashen because he's going to think I'm just criticizing. Like, it's still Brashen. I know that he's the captain and she's trying to play this part of her second mate. But you'd think that she could just say, this is how I feel, and like try to work through it aloud.
I think she's trying to prove it to herself too, that she can be a good second mate and not rely on relationships and who you know. Because that was a big thing too, right? She didn't want Brashen to find out. She wanted to work as like the ship's boy on the Reaper to work her way to like good standing, you know?
Yeah. And I guess earlier last book, whenever there was trouble aboard with how what's his name was treating her, she didn't want to talk to Brashen about it because she didn't want him to interfere. It was something she had to do. So I guess you're right.
Yeah. So she takes a breath and says, since the serpent attack, I have found my share of the command easier to manage. The sailors obey me swiftly and well. I feel that I have won their hearts as well as their allegiance. She drew another breath and crossed a line. However, since the attack, the first mate has chosen to tighten discipline. Some of it is understandable. The men did not react well during the attack. Some did not obey. Few jumped in to assist us. Brashen scowled as he spoke. I myself noted that Lavoy did not assist us. His watch was well begun and he was on the deck, yet he did not aid us at all. Althea felt her stomach jump nervously. She should have noticed that. Lavoy had stood it out while she and Brashen fought the serpent. At the time, it had seemed oddly natural that the two would be the ones to stand before the serpent. She wondered if Lavoy's absence had any significance beyond his being afraid. Had Lavoy hoped that she, Brashen, or even both of them might be killed? Did he hope to inherit command of the ship? If he did, what would become of their original quest? Brashen was silent again, obviously letting her think. She took a breath. Since the serpent attack, the first mate has tightened discipline, but not evenly. Some of the men appear to be targeted unfairly, Lop for one, Clef for another. Brashen watched her carefully as he observed, I would not have expected you to have much sympathy for Lop. He did nothing to aid you when R2 attacked you. Althea shook her head almost angrily. No one should have expected him to, she declared. The man is a half-wit in some ways. Give him direction, tell him what to do, and he performs well enough. He was agitated when I was fighting R2 off. Lop was leaping about, hitting himself in the chest and berating himself. He genuinely had no idea what to do. R2 was a shipmate, I was the second mate, and he did not know whom to choose. But on the deck, when the serpent attacked, I remember he was the one with the guts to fling a bucket at the creature and then drag half to safety. But for Lop's action, we'd be short a hand. He's not smart, far from it, but he's a good sailor if he's not pushed past his abilities. So she is good at evaluating people and what drives them and their motivations in general, and kind of good at that second mate, like identifying what they need to thrive in the best environments. Brashen continues on, kind of prodding her with questions, pushing her in a direction that he wants her thoughts to take. It feels like Brashen knows that Althea has not thought about this in any critical sense. And Brashen is kind of leading her in this way, because then he asks, you feel Lavoy pushes Lop past his abilities. The men make Lop the butt of their jokes. That is to be expected as long as they don't take it too far. Lop seems to enjoy the attention. But when Lavoy joins in, the game becomes crueler and more dangerous. So she tells him about how he kind of beat up Lop, and she has to go tailor tailor him, I guess, sew up his face or whatever,
Right.
see to him after this meeting.
Which is the second time in as many days as he has been banged up.
hmm They bait him into doing dangerous or foolish things, and when something is amiss and Lavoy targets Lop for it, not one of his shipmates owns up to the part of the blame. That's not good for the crew. It divides their unity just when we need to build it. Brashen was nodding gravely. Have you observed Lavoy with the slaves we liberated from Bingtown? He asked quietly. The question jolted her. She stood silent for a moment, running over the past few days in her mind. He treats them well, she said at last. I've never seen him turn his temper on them. He does not mingle them with the rest of the crew as much as he might. Some seem to have great potential. Harg and Kittle deny it, but I believe they've worked a deck before this. Some of the others have the scars and manners of men who are familiar with weapons. Our two best archers have tattooed faces. Yet every one of them swears he is the son of a tradesman or merchant, an innocent inhabitant of the Pirate Isles, captured by slave raiders. They are valuable additions to our crew, but they keep to themselves. I think in the long run we must get the other sailors to accept them as ordinary shipmates in order to... And you perceive that he not only allows them to keep to themselves, but seems to encourage it by how he metes out the work. So now Althea is finally like, what's Brashen getting at with all these questions?
It does make me wonder, how does Brashen know all this? If he does know, how does he know? Like, has he been observing this before now?
It seems to. I mean, Althea keeps talking about, like, he doesn't have time to nursemaid or take complaints. He has to be a captain. I think that's part of captaining. I think he's kind of in all shifts and is trying to just see how well things are working and what he needs to direct his mates to do to make it work better.
Okay.
So it seems to me that he is doing very well as a captain and has observed Lavoy kind of increasing a divide between the crew here.
So then why is he just trying to confirm that by the questions he's asking, or is he trying to get Althea to be part of the solution? Like, I don't understand.
I think both.
Okay.
I think he wants somebody to talk it out with and see if he's not crazy. And remember, he started this conversation with, Lavoy brought me interesting thoughts, but here's the backstory of why I'm struggling with some of these thoughts.
Right.
And if he's capable of that deception, because he seems to be doing cunning things to maybe accidentally, maybe on purpose, create division.
Right.
So I think he's bringing her up to speed. One, to bounce the ideas off and make sure they have the back story correct and are on the same page. And two, he's literally asked her there for solutions in that meeting. So I think that's part of what you said, you know? I agree with you there. They brought her in for that. So he asks that. He asks, like, hey, is this Lavoy's issue? Is he not only allowing them to keep to themselves, but seems to encourage them to keep to themselves? She takes a breath. Lavoy seems to use Harg and Kittle almost as a captain would use a first and second mate to run his watch. Sometimes it seems that the former slaves are an independent second crew on the ship. Uncomfortably, she observed, the lack of acceptance seems to go both ways. It is not just that our dock scrapings don't accept the former slaves, the tattooed ones are just as inclined to keep to themselves. They were slaves in Bingtown. Most came to that fate because they were originally captured in Pirate Isle towns, Brashen said. They were willing to risk all and steal away from Bingtown aboard the Paragon because we represented a chance to return home. I was willing to trade that to them in exchange for their labor aboard the ship when we were preparing for departure. Now I am not so sure that was a wise bargain. A man captured in the Pirate Isles to be sold as a slave is more likely to be a pirate than not, or at least to have a good sympathy for the pirates. So Brashen is kind of hinting at, and Althea agrees, like, are you thinking about the loyalty to us if we go to the Pirate Isles? And the captain's like, I don't know, maybe. It's hard to tell at this point.
And he's worried that they have more loyalty to Lavoy than to Althea and himself.
Or to Paragon even.
Right.
This is Lavoy's suggestion. He gets to the main point now. He says that as we enter the waters of the Pirate Isles, we stand a better chance of getting in close if we pretend to be pirates ourselves. He says his tattooed sailors could lend us credibility and teach us pirate ways. He hints that some may even have a good knowledge of the islands. So, we could go on as a pirate vessel. What? How? And Brashen says we could get a flag, take a ship or two, for the practice of battle, as Lavoy puts it, and then go to a town, say, hey, we're here to follow Kennit and find him.
Right.
Last I heard, he was gathering a following for himself. If we pretended we wanted to be a part of that following, we might be able to get close to him and determine Vivacia's situation before we acted. Althea pushed her outrage aside and forced herself to consider the idea. So that leads Althea to actually thinking about next steps.
Right.
Because she's kind of been focused on, we need to make Paragon okay, and we need to make the crew okay.
Yeah. And that's not going so well.
Yeah. And this is the second time somebody has said, like, look towards your goal a little bit.
Yeah.
Paragon was a little unhelpful, and Brashen kind of walked her to this end and forced her to confront this now. Like, hey, we need to have a plan.
Yeah.
Because we need to be able to find Vivacia at all to begin with, to have any sort of idea of what we're going to do. So he walks her to this, and then she says, okay, if we do this, we could be drawn into a stronghold. Then there would be no possibility of escape. There are two other immense barriers to such an idea. One is Paragon. He's a live ship. And two, we would have to kill simply for battle practice. We'd have to attack some little merchant vessel, kill the crew, steal their cargo. How can he even think of such a thing? We could attack a slaver. That jolted her into silence. He was serious. He met her astonished silence with a weary look. We have no other strategy. I keep trying to devise ways for us to locate Vivacia surreptitiously, then follow her and attack when Kennit least expects it. I come up with nothing. And I suspect that if Kennit does hold any of the original crew hostage, he would execute them rather than let us rescue them. I thought we intended to negotiate first, to offer a ransom for survivors in the ship. Even to herself, the words sounded childish and naive. And she just kind of reflects that the cash that they raised probably wouldn't be enough for a lot of things.
Wouldn't be enough for a normal ship, let alone a live ship.
Yeah. She had pushed that problem to the back of her mind, telling herself that they would negotiate with Kennit and promise him a second larger payment once Vivacia was returned intact to Bingtown. Ransom was what most pirates wanted. It was the underlying reason for piracy. Except that Kennit was not like most pirates.
Right.
So she thinks about that now, finally kind of confronting that issue and saying, yeah, he captured slavers, killed the crew, made those slaves free, gave them the ship, and they in turn captured other slavers. If this was any other ship, she'd be cheering Kennit on, she thinks. Great, stick it to the slavers of Jamalia, but...
Chalced.
Of Chalced, yeah. But he has Vivacia.
Because Kyle turned Vivacia into a slave ship, which is what got them into this.
Althea wanted Vivacia back so intensely that it was like a constant pain in her heart. You see, Brashen confirmed quietly. He had been watching her face. She lowered her eyes from his gaze, suddenly embarrassed that he could read her thoughts so easily. Sooner or later, it must come down to blood. We could take down a small slaver. We don't have to kill the crew. If they surrendered, we could put them adrift in the ship's boats. Then we could take the ship into a pirate town and free her cargo, just as Kennit does. It might win us the confidence of the folk of the Pirate Isles. It might buy us the knowledge we need to go after the Vivacia. It sounded suddenly uncertain. The dark eyes regarding her were almost tormented. She was puzzled. Are you asking my permission? He frowned. It was a moment before he spoke. It's awkward, he admitted softly. I am the captain of the Paragon. But the Vivacia is your family ship. Your family financed this expedition. I feel that in some decisions, you have the right to be heard as more than the second mate. He glances down and then eventually looks back up at her. So, Althea, what do you think? The way he spoke her first name suddenly changed the whole tenor of the conversation. So now he gestures to a chair, he gets some drinks out, they sit down, and
so
it's more casual.
Yeah. This part, Makes me feel as though this is a bad decision on Brashen's part. Not, I don't know. I think that it's good that he respects Althea and her opinion. Why is he getting drinks? Why is he making this so casual? This isn't like a great look if anybody were to come in, which we know somebody does. So why? And I get it. Like, I don't think that there's necessarily a problem, but for Althea, who is been so bent out of shape about keeping the status quo and making there be a line, she really goes with this pretty quick. She's like,
because
okay,
her heart wants, you know?
Yeah, true. But it's just like such a.
But he's also asking her opinion as Althea, right? And this is kind of what she craves too, is that acknowledgement of equality.
Yeah.
I am your equal in this. We are making a decision together.
Yeah. And I think that is good and important. But I also find it interesting that she keeps calling Brashen like a great captain. He's doing good begrudgingly. Yet he doesn't really make decisions on his own. He is having her come in and help make decisions. He doesn't ultimately want to be the one making all the calls, which is the job of a captain.
Well, not all of them. You kind of implied that he was bringing her in for everything. This seems like the first thing that he's bringing her in on.
Okay. Touche. But to bring her in at all, is that not?
Well, he seems awkward about it too. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to make the decision by myself because this is, one, a big decision.
Right.
I'm going to go pirate. 2, this is your rescue mission.
I guess, yeah.
Like, I get his reasoning for doing it.
Okay. I just would argue that sometimes being a captain is making hard decisions. But
a hard decision to bring in somebody else to help.
Okay.
She once again brings up there's Paragon to consider.
Oh, you're skipping the best part, that she watched as his clean hands poured the drink and she tried to keep her mind on the conversation. I just had to make sure that the clean hands got brought up again.
Yes. His clean, gentlemanly hands. Well, she turns the conversation to Paragon. We know his aversion to pirates. How would he feel about it? Brashen made a low noise in his throat and abruptly set down his rum. That's the strangest twist of all. Lavoy claims the ship would welcome it. Althea was incredulous. How could he know that? Has he already spoken to Paragon about this? Anger flared in her. How dare he? The last thing we need is him planting such ideas in Paragon's head. His claim was that Paragon spoke to him about it. He says he was having a pipe up on the bow one evening and that the figure had spoke to him asking him if he'd ever considered turning pirate. From there, the idea came up that a pirate vessel would be the safest way to get into Pirate Harbor, and Paragon bragged that he knew many secret ways of the Pirate Isles, or so Lavoy says. Have you asked Paragon about it? Brashen denies, saying he doesn't want to bring it up just in case Paragon takes that as, 1, a confirmation that it's happening, so he goes all gung-ho about it, or 2, a denial that it's happening, so he is stubborn about it and goes for it anyways.
Yeah. It's a very precarious line to walk.
Mm-hmm.
But do we think Lavoy actually nonchalantly got this out of Paragon?
I think the conversation did happen. I don't know if Lavoy brought it up first or if Paragon brought it up first. That would be impossible to say. But I can definitely see Paragon doing this because he wants to get to Kennit that badly.
That's fair. But why wouldn't he bring it up with somebody else? Why Lavoy?
I don't know. Maybe Lavoy brought it up. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Maybe he broached the topic. I don't know. Either way, I think Paragon would be fine with it. And he kind of is fine with it.
Yeah. And Althea makes the mention, I wonder if the damage isn't already done because he's been kind of strange lately.
Yeah. She also notes that the rum is making a warm spot in her belly.
Yes.
I think they've refilled it once already. So rum is a flowing.
Which again, is that the wisest choice to be making with somebody who has to have a watch? 1 sip, okay, I'll forgive it. 2 to 3? Really? What are we doing now, kids?
And when has this not been true of him, Brashen says? When has he not been strange? This is different. He is strange in an ominous way. He speaks of us encountering Kennit as our destiny, and says nothing must keep us from that end. You don't agree with that? I don't know about the destiny part. Brashen, if we could come upon Vivacia when she had only an anchor watch aboard her and steal her back, I would be content. All I want is my ship, and her crew if any have survived. I have no desire for any more battle or blood than there must be. Nor have I. But I do not think we will recover Vivacia without both. We must harden ourselves to that now. I know, she conceded reluctantly, but she wondered if she did. She had never been in any kind of battle.
She knows that she could fight if somebody attacks her, but she doesn't really know if she has it in her to just
go to another deck and kill somebody. Yeah.
Because that's way different. Also, in this scenario, she'd be going to a live ship deck to kill on her personal family live ship, which not good.
Yeah. Either that or even a slaver.
Yeah.
She's thinking about like just
True.
any
in
battle.
General, how do you just murder people?
However, she did know one thing. She wanted Vivacia back. She wanted that savagely. Perhaps when she saw her beloved ship in foreign hands, anger and fury would waken her. Perhaps she could kill then. Well, Brashen asked her, and she realized she had been staring past him. She brought her eyes back. Her fingers toyed with her glass as she asked, well, what? Do we become pirates? Or at least put on the countenance of pirates? You're the captain, she said at last. I think you must decide. He was silent for a moment, then he grinned. I confess, on some level, it appeals to me. I've given it some thought. For our flag, how about a scarlet sea serpent on a blue background? Sounds unlucky, but frightening. Frightening is what we would want to be.
True. Just a quick side note, a funny side note. You're the captain, she said at last. I think you must decide. To Brashen being like, I'm giving you an option. Tell me.
Yeah.
I made the comment, that's Luke when I ask him what's for dinner.
That's you when I ask what's for dinner. We're both, okay, everyone listening, we are both people who don't know what's for dinner.
No.
That's really frustrating when I'm the one cooking 90% of the time.
You know the ingredients, I don't. You tell me. You're the captain. You
Tell me what to buy at the grocery store. Exactly. What are you hungry for? Well, Althea doesn't know. Brashen kind of wants to do it because he sees that's kind of the only path forward. And it kind of excites him too, you know.
Right. And he's honest about that. And, you know, she's kind of toying with the idea of like, so we'd only go after slavers. Maybe that'll make it okay.
I want to actually, before you move on to that, there's a small little comment that he says after Althea says, sounds unlucky, but frightening. He says, yeah, frightening is what we want. But as to luck, I'm afraid we'll have to make that for ourselves. Very counter to Kennit's position. Just want to point that out.
Because Kennit just has luck.
Yeah.
Which is true.
But yeah, Althea asks we'd go after slavers only. His face grew grave for a moment. Then a touch of his old grin lightened up. Maybe we wouldn't have to go after anything. Maybe we could just make it look like we had, or that we intend to. How about a bit of play acting? I think I'd have to be a dissatisfied younger son from Bingtown, something of a fop, perhaps. A gentleman come south to dabble in piracy and politics. What do you think? Althea laughed aloud. The rum was uncoiling in her belly, sending tendrils of warmth throughout her body. I think you could come to enjoy this too much, Brashen. What about me? How'd you explain female crew aboard a Bingtown vessel? You could be my lovely captive, like in a minstrel's tale, the daughter of a trader taken hostage and held for ransom. That might help establish my reputation as a daring pirate. We could say the Paragon was your family ship to explain away the live ship. That's a bit overly dramatic, she demurred softly. There was a brighter spark in his eyes. The rum was reaching them both, she decided. Just as she feared that her heart would overpower her head, his face turned suddenly grim. Would that we could play act such a romantic farce and win Vivacia back. The reality of playing pirate would be far more bloody and ruthless. My fear is that I won't enjoy it nearly as much as Lavoy or Paragon. He shook his head. Both of them have a streak of, what shall I call it? Just plain meanness, I think. If either one were allowed complete indulgence of it, I suspect they would sink to a savagery that you or I would find unthinkable. So Brashen stops the little spark of glee in the eyes there.
And the little cute, flirty,
Yeah.
well, you're a beautiful maiden that I've taken off. Like, okay, okay, Malta.
Right.
Also, I can see where Serwin gets it. It's a Trell trait to be dramatic.
It is. Got that romantic streak.
Uh-huh. But he is talking about the real fears now. And that's...
I'm curious about Althea's response to this. Like, Paragon? She's skeptical. She doesn't know that Paragon have like a streak of meanness in him.
Also, hasn't she had that thought?
Right.
I don't know. But it does say that she like has a shiver of
certainty.
No, yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's just because she feels bad saying it out loud.
Brashen says he and Lavoy may be a very bad mix. I'd like to keep them from becoming close if such a thing is possible. Sudden knock at the door made them both jump. Who is it? Lavoy, sir. Come in. Althea jumps to her feet and is like, oh, I wasn't being comfortable and drinking rum with the captain.
Yeah, which honestly makes her seem more guilty, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And his quick glance took in the rum bottle and the glasses on the table. Althea tried not to look startled or guilty, but the look he gave her expressed his suspicions plainly. His sarcasm was little short of insubordinate as he addressed Brashen.
Sorry to interrupt you both, but there's ship's business to attend to. The carpenter is unconscious on the forward deck. Thought you'd like to know. What happened? Althea demands. I'm reporting to the captain, sailor. Exactly. Brashen's voice was cold. So get on with it. Althea, go see to the carpenter. Lavoy, what happened? Damn me if I know, the burly mate shrugged elaborately. I just found her there and thought you'd like to know. Since there was no time to contradict him, she couldn't say like she had left them alone together and is rushing out to see what he had done to Amber.
Okay, first of all, what do you mean there's no time to contradict him? Just do it. Just be like, just so you know, last time I saw you were standing there with her, so not true. Anyway, bye. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Frustrating. What do you mean there's no time? She's gonna be there when you get there either way.
But we know he actually hadn't really touched her at all, right? He might have like gripped her by the shirt and like threatened or something. But I don't think actual harm came to her until Fitz pushes him away.
Oh,
I think
right.
I think Fitz like goes into his mind and like changes like, hey, go get help or something.
Fitz chivalry?
Yeah. We talked about this before.
Yeah.
Because in the next trilogy, he says he has a dream about her.
Yeah.
About your alter ego, about a woman on a ship. And I like, who was about to get hurt or something. And I reached out and moved the guy to get help or something. He like talks about that dream that he has.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We'll have to, whenever we see what Amber says happened, we'll have to like see if we can piece that part together.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know.
Maybe I'll look it up in the short break before we come back with our listener comments, and I'll correct myself if I can or get the story straight. But that's the end of the chapter right there.
Yeah.
Brashen and Althea get a little bit close again.
As if they don't always.
Yeah, Robin Hobb, of course, keeps us on the edge of our seats with the enemies to lovers.
True. Also, I really want to know how long Lavoy has been listening into their conversation.
Yeah.
At least, I think he's at least heard that Brashen thinks he and Paragon shouldn't be friends and that they're both mean.
That was the very last thing he said. So.
Yeah, so he for sure heard that part. What else did he hear? I don't know. Maybe he heard the little
streak of
play
meanness.
pretend.
Oh, maybe.
The romantic getaway. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot happened in that chapter. A lot happened.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had a lot of notes about it.
Yeah. Lots to talk about. I think that always happens, though, whenever it's the first time we've seen.
Come back to a point of view, yeah.
Yeah. So.
True.
But good to see them. They're all doing well, mostly. As well as they can
Amber,
be.
maybe.
Well.
And Clef. Well, thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you have any thoughts to share with us, please do. You can email us at isfitshappy@gmail.com, Or as always, you can message us on social media. Where is Fitz Happy at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, YouTube, all of those.
We always are excited to see what you guys think.
Okay, as promised, I did look up the Amber Lavoy and Fitz interaction while we were in our break here.
Nice.
Yes. So what I found was at the beginning of Fool's Errand, when the Fool visits Fitz for the first time, he says he has a dream of the Fool on a ship being attacked, and he repels the assailant away. In, I believe, a coming up chapter, I think chapter 9 of this book, it's kind of reflected on that, and it happens in the past, but Amber has a few bruises on her face, but was just found unconscious. And later, I think Lavoy doesn't know why he stopped beating Amber. Like, he didn't finish the beating. It was like a small thought or something like that. I didn't see that in the book, but I read that in a comment of somebody else asking a question about it. So I think that recalling that is true as well. So
Lavoy did beat up Amber.
Yes, did. Well, Amber refuses to admit that it was Lavoy. She says that she just collapsed and her bruises were from the fall. And she says, don't you think Paragon would have said it was Lavoy if that's what happened? She refuses, even when they're in the crow's nest, just her and Althea. And at the same time, she says, we have to get rid of Lavoy because he's sowing discontent. Wouldn't you think, like, to convince Althea, she'd be like, yeah, Lavoy beat me up, let's get rid of him. And then Althea would be all on her side. But she's just saying, like, no, Lavoy's sowing discontent and making people violent, but I fell and injured my face.
I don't know. Maybe
It's weird. I think Lavoy did beat her up, but that shades it a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm wondering if maybe then there's like, that's more of a like, oh, if Paragon's going to pretend like Lavoy didn't beat me up then it's just because I fell.
Maybe.
And like more of like a mad thing at Paragon. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be a number of reasons, but that's what she insists. Okay. So that's kind of the story there. We know that Fitz was probably skill walking, found that connection to Amber because they have that connection, and saw the Fool, knew it was the Fool being attacked, but it was a dream, so it was the Fool in Fitz's mind and not in that getup, and then repelled the person.
To be fair, they're connected on a spiritual level.
Right. Yeah.
They do have that connection. And so it's possible that Amber was scared and unknowingly drew him in, because it seems like that happens when people are in danger. They unknowingly like reach out into the skill.
Yeah.
And so potentially that's what drew Fitz there. And I think it's really interesting to think about Fitz not noticing the dress and just knowing that it was beloved.
Well, I think they were kind of either cowering or already on the deck.
And to be fair, doesn't Amber wear pants?
I think so, yeah.
So, I mean, it's Fitz we're talking about.
Right.
He just knows that
the Fool.
Yeah, that's beloved. And like long hair on a dude isn't that weird? And like that he has long hair. And
right, exactly.
I don't know.
Dressed as a sailor too, not in like a dress or anything. So.
Yeah, so I don't know. It does not surprise me that Fitz would be oblivious to beloved pretending to be a woman.
Yeah. So Lavoy was definitely like hitting Amber a couple times.
Right.
And Fitz repelled him away, I think. Probably a combination of skill and the wit.
Right.
Like he always does.
Yeah.
So
true.
So that happens.
Good to know.
And it's brought up in the next book.
Can't wait to read it.
So anyways,
so
take it away. This is your section.
Yes. Sorry. We got to get now into the best part, which is hearing from you guys. And we're going to start today with a Facebook comment from Ellen. And that is the question: do you remember when and how Rain learned Cintaglia's name? I don't, but I hope he did, and that it's not a plot hole that he does suddenly know the name. We looked it up.
Yeah, there's only, I think, 2 instances of Tintaglia in mad ship, and that's one when Lasagna tells Malta her name because Malta demands it, and two from Tintaglia's point of view at the end. Tintaglia banked her wings.
Mm-hmm.
So it does not happen in book. So it's either a plot hole, or we can assume that she is also told Rain during the time tormenting him or being connected to him.
Right. Or just off scene before we've even met Rain.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a plot hole, but it a little bit is.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Because he also didn't use the name to Malta, who you think he would have told.
Right.
But who knows, I guess. So, no, we
Thanks
do
for
not
bringing
get to
that up.
see. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up. We also had a few emails from Jonas, the first point of which is about Paragon and Vivacia and makes Paragon a lot more sympathetic.
Right. Yeah, Jonas is happy that we discussed what Vivacia was going through and just realized that's kind of probably what Paragon has felt for the last years upon years.
Uh-huh.
Specifically talking about how Vivacia is wording her loneliness without Wintro and how she is talking about the dark parts of her when she can't feel Wintro, when he is, hiding in his own body and her consciousness.
Yes.
That's how Paragon is all the time, and Jonas is surprised that he's even happy sometimes. Always thought that Paragon was a grumpy ship, but now is kind of impressed with him. So
That he ever has a good mood at all.
Yeah.
Definitely puts Paragon in a little bit more of a sympathetic light. And it is something that I don't think I connected the dots to, even though we just read that whole thing about, her being so lonely with Wintro even on her ship, just because they don't have that connection anymore. And yeah, Paragon's been dealing with that by himself on a beach with no one to talk to.
Visual stimulus to distract himself with.
Right. And he can't just talk to the rest of the crew. There is no crew. He's on a beach. So poor Paragon, as usual. But also, Jonas had some thoughts about wizard wood and how it works.
Yeah, with our conversation talking about how the
Kennit's
charm seems to reply to Kennit's thoughts and what's the extent of the bond between them. Can they actually read the minds, or is it just kind of a vague, idea of where those thoughts are going, that sort of thing.
Right. And Jonas feels that there are many different factors deciding how vague or clear reading other minds could be. Has blood soaked up into the ship/charm? Does the person open themselves to the ship or charm? Is it family? Maybe even some rudimentary form of skill or completely skillless? Not sure about the last one, but for me, it makes sense that Paragon could read Kennit's mind when they were so close, with Kennit having died and bled on Paragon. He's much more close-minded to the charm, so it might just be more vague.
And yeah, I like that. I think that kind of adds a direction to my thoughts on the matter. It just kind of depends.
Yeah. And I think it does make sense that it's a little more of a loose rule, which all the magic is in this series, but that gives it a little bit more structure, I guess, so I don't mind. So thank you, Jonas, for those thoughts. Good to think on.
Yeah, definitely.
Going forward. We also had a message from Anne about how making a movie / a series out of the book would work.
Yeah, sorry to Anne. We didn't comment on this when we were talking about adaptions.
Yes.
This was from a little bit ago, and when we were talking about, what would be the best movies set up, and I was kind of leading Emma through how one movie for a trilogy would not work very well. Anne has some pretty ambitious but a good idea of how it could get done here. So Anne is talking about how it could work is that you would have to film Farseer and Live Ships at the same time with collaborating but different directors. And the only actor that would have to pop in between the two would be the Fool.
Yeah.
Or Beloved. Obviously, tons of money, tons of CGI for things. You could do, For the wit bond, it would be like telepathic links, just like show a regular wolf and then like words.
Yeah.
Don't CGI a mouth
The mouth
moving.
moving, because
Yeah.
Anne says that would ruin it, but also agreed. I do not want to see a realistic wolf with the CGI mouth talking. I think telepathic works fine with me. Also notes that Rainwild and Tawny Man would also have to be filmed at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, man, it's so hard because I can poke so many holes through this. I want it to be done.
Yes.
But one big thing, actor age.
Yeah. But why is that a big thing?
The Fool. If the Fool is going to be the same in both and hopping between the sets, how are you going to be acting like a 9-year-old kid the same age as Fitz when he's young? Obviously, different actor there. To a adolescent, that has to be kind of the same person as Amber.
Okay, but the adolescent actor would spend more time as Amber, like just on that set, and then whenever the age up happens, would come over to the Six Duchies set.
You mean the opposite way, right?
No, because
when they're younger, they spend more time in the Six Duchies set, and then they go over to Liveship.
No, because you would have one actor playing the young version of the Fool, and then eventually they have to age up because people don't age that fast. So it would be a different person anyway. So it wouldn't matter at first because Amber can be in, and it would honestly actually maybe work out even better because Amber is in the other series going on, and then all of a sudden here comes Fool played by the same actor later on in the other series. It'd be like, oh my god, they're the same person. I don't know. Just a thought.
All right, well,
I think it would work.
Hollywood, you're listening, you know.
You can pay us.
We'll pass them along to Anne, you know.
yeah Anne can get a portion.
We'll all be creative producers on it.
Yes, yeah. So thank you, Anne, for telling us about that idea. And then finally, we have a listener who will not hear this for a while, which is Claire. Claire is writing in, and they're reaching the end of book 2 of the Farseer trilogy.
Yes,
so,
Royal Assassin.
Yeah, long way to go before they get here, but hi, Claire. And they have a really, really interesting thought about Regal, of all people.
Mm-hmm. Of all people.
Of all people. The theory Claire has is that maybe Regal isn't Shrewd's son. Why would Desire not want Regal to be trained in the skill? Surely she would want him to have the magic of the royal family. Regal being a sickly child seems a bit of a feeble excuse. Does she worry that they will discover that he's not Shrewd somehow? Remember, she doesn't know how the magic works. She had multiple miscarriages whilst with Shrew, which was blamed on her use of drugs and other bad habits. What if she had
Rhesus blood type
and was not able to carry Shrewd's bloodline to term? I can't think that Regal is ever described as looking like Shrewd or his brothers. Methinks the Queen protests too much by naming him Regal and insisting he is more royal than his brothers. The reason I started thinking about this was Verity's comment to Fitz after he declares the Six Duchy people are his people, quote, blood will tell. And yet, Regal never cares about the people. I'd love to know your thoughts.
I'm sure you love this.
I love this so much. I am all about secret bastards. I'm here for it. I 100% take this to be real and fact, and nobody can convince me otherwise.
I do not take it to be fact. I think it is a very cool theory, and I like it, and it would be very cool, but I fully am in the camp that Regal is a half-brother to the others.
Okay.
I truly don't believe that the blood will tell thing is any indicator. It's not really evidence. It's just how you were raised, basically.
Okay.
You know, Regal was not raised as a regular Farseer.
Sure. A little bit more spoiled.
Right, yeah. And honestly, the not raised in the skill thing. I think Desire just wanted, like, Galen's got the skill thing down. Regal's gonna be the king, you know?
True, but I will say that Galen having skill and not being related to Shrewd does put a little bit more weight to the fact that she could have a kid that has skill without it being a Farseer.
True.
Because we know that Regal does have some capacity for skill. It's just
very
not
small and not exercised.
Yeah. So, but I do like the point of why wouldn't she want him to be part of the royal magic? Like, that's the whole thing about the Farseers, is they have this special magic and bloodline, and she's very like, not my baby.
Well, 1, Galen's not a good teacher. 2,
You think she knows that?
He's a very rough teacher, and skill is kind of mentally draining, and Galen kind of goes off the deep end of how he lives, and she probably wouldn't want Regal to live like that.
I guess, but like, don't you think that since if his mom told him to be nice to his brother, he would? Like, they're related, and he hates Fitz. But I guess he does go a little extreme with all the other ones too. But I mean, like,
Galen hates Fitz because of skill.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, I don't know. The only other thing in there is, I'm pretty sure people do mention that Regal does look like a Farseer.
Does he?
Yeah. Because he has the same kind of hair.
Curly?
Yeah, dark and curly. He's dark features, and he's
so does Molly.
Right. But I'm pretty sure people do mention that.
I thought they said that he looked like his mom.
I don't remember.
I mean, I was going to say they say that he's like super handsome, but then they say that about all of them. So
yeah,
the Farseers are hot. They got hot genes.
Oh, so you admit he's a Farseer. Interesting.
Okay.
No, it's a very, very cool theory, and it definitely could be true. Just in my heart, I think he is part of that family, just
fair,
raised by Desire instead of with love in their heart.
Yeah, I like the idea too, because then we can pretend like the Farseers don't have the evil in them. Although I could argue that Shrewd pretty evil. So I don't know.
He's just practical, you know.
He's not evil. I don't hate him as much as Ephraim. Only teasing. No, but thank you so much, Claire. I think that's such a fun thought. Like I said, I think I'm still going to believe it because it doesn't really affect the story either way, but I like it a lot. And I don't know. I think that's really fun. Maybe also why he's so mad about Fitz.
Right. Yeah. Could be.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone who wrote in. And thank you guys who listen. We always love hearing from you and seeing what you guys think every week. So see you next week.